Well, I'm so excited today because my good friend and fellow speaker is here with us and our community. He has given me endless advice, both in business and personal, just based on his own journey. And I'm excited to bring him in because I definitely could have used him years ago within this topic of navigating some struggles with other people, but also those difficult conversations that we just don't want to hop into sometimes. Welcome the top 15 2025 speakers of Vistage, your CEO roundtables, Rick Czaplewski, and my good friend, fellow speaker of negotiations. Now, you're probably thinking, like, Kelly, why are you bringing someone who talks about negotiations onto your podcast, onto your YouTube channel? And isn't that life? Isn't that life where we're just constantly negotiating with other people, with ourselves? And me and Rick have gotten down in the weeds in some of these conversations. And I was like, you know who else could use this? All of you. So I brought Rick onto the show to really dig into the little parts that we don't talk about, that we negotiate in silence, but there's actually great tools and techniques that you can use. So welcome, Rick.
Hi, Kelly. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, Rick has quite a story. I met him kind of in the after, and so when he tells me some of these backstory moments, it's the definition of resiliency. I cannot describe what has been through the ringer for Rick, and he still shows up as himself with energy, and that is something that I admire. So, Rick, give us a little bit of your backstory and how you got to be a speaker in negotiations.
Yeah, well, you mentioned resilience. If folks are curious, I'm a 30-year cancer survivor. I was diagnosed when I was in college, not once, twice. And I went through Hodgkin's disease while a college student. And then more recently, I survived open heart surgery. But I keep showing up, and my mission in life is to talk not only about surviving those issues, but also negotiation, which is my favorite topic, my favorite thing to do in business. And as somebody with a finance background, I found out quickly that if you have the ability to influence transactions, discussions, or large situations, you can immediately impact your personal and your business's performance. So I fell in love with negotiation, so much so that I started to teach it myself. So really happy to be here, Kelly, and talk to your audience about some of the topics that they're dealing with.
Yeah, and let's talk about this topic a little bit more. So, when I think negotiation, I think of my HR career, negotiating with the labor union, some big contracts, meeting in the middle. Do you trust someone? Where can I win? Where can you win maybe? And how do we all get home happy at the end of the day? It felt like in the workforce it was a constant negotiation. But when I think that way, I think of leverage tactics, things you say, scripts you use. But as a cancer survivor, how did this type of business skill set start to leak into your personal life? How you choose your battles, how you choose the conversations that you're going to have, because I used to keep them separate, right? I'm negotiating for a union contract. That's money talk. That's a labor contract. But then during my burnout recovery, I realized some of these tactics and techniques that I thought were business related were also related to my own life, the boundaries I'm having, the conversations, the people I'm around. So, how did you start to see these two worlds collide?
Yeah, I think as a cancer survivor, anybody who's been through this, especially if you've done this when you were younger, time is accelerated. And really, the finite element of life is something that's constantly in play, which means I'm willing to stay up later, do more experiences, and really squeeze the juice out of life. And I found that more so with someone who doesn't have that perspective. And with talking with other survivors, it's this clock always ticking motivation that keeps me going towards things. Now, negotiation is really a tool that helps with that philosophy or helps with that life approach. And I don't feel like this is even a choice, honestly. I feel like this is my life and this is what I was destined to feel and to have as my own personal philosophy. Negotiation helps me augment that. It helps me get better results, better experiences, better relationships when that's exactly what I'm trying to get out of life. And in life, you don't get what you want, you get what you negotiate. And it's not happenstance what happens. You can make this you can make certain things happen in your favor, which is where I became really skilled at negotiation and eventually took it on the road and started to teach people this. So,
Well, and it's interesting that you talk about time, right? And it's not guaranteed, and it seems that the speed of it is relative to what might be going on with you. But then you mentioned two things that you began to focus on in really the negotiations, which was relationships and experiences. And I feel like those are the two things that go in the back burner when we're busy, when we're stressed, when we're trying to win. That sometimes those are at stake, and we disregard that because we want the now, or we want to set us up for the next chapter that might not even be there. So it's interesting that you've said something very similar to other practices in energy management, that time is relative to the person. So the real focus should be on relationships, experiences, the actual being of life.
yeah, when you think about negotiation, but when I ask the question to audiences, what are some of the words you think of when you think of the word negotiation? And the common answers are bargaining, haggling, conflict, win-win. It's something that puts you at the table across from someone and you're going over and you're trying to get to the bottom of a deal or make a sale or what have you. I believe negotiation is a set of steps before and after bargaining, and it starts with your outcome. Whatever you are negotiating, you're trying to get a result. If you're at the car dealer and you're sitting across from somebody, you're not there to become their friend, you're there to get the best deal that you can. So one side of your outcome is the result. And the other side is the relationship. If you're at home at night and you're negotiating something with your significant other, what to eat, what's on TV, how to load the dishwasher, all those mundane things in life, and you're going tooth and nail for something like that, your relationship is going to suffer. And what I find in a negotiation, when you start with your outcome in mind, you start with what am I trying to get out of this? It's a mix of result and relationship. And it depends on your negotiation situation. Sometimes the relationship is more important. Other times it's a result negotiation. So if you start there, then you can start to prepare for the type of discussion that you're going to have.
Yeah, I like the mix of the two because I've had in leadership programs the conversation about forks up or forks down, debate me, and it's to get them uncomfortable with conflict and then bring them into the comfort of healthy conflict. And it's interesting that that grand debate because of exactly what you said. Do you want the result of dishes being clean, or do you want people to help you? Because if you nag people for the one way that you want it done, they're not going to help you. Now you're doing all the dishes. And that was a hard lesson learned for me too, is that if I want people to help me, the outcome is clean dishes. So am I going to nag them for forks up, forks down, how it's loaded? No. But guess what? If those forks come out and they're dirty, they got to clean them because the outcome is clean dishes. And so many people started helping me in my household, and I got the result that I wanted. But you're right. We like to micromanage some of those situations and only focus on one factor than the other, and then we're not happy with the outcome.
Yeah, and maintaining respect for your counterpart in business and in your personal life is also critical. Great example of the dishwasher. It's something so mundane and silly, but it's also if you've had a lengthy relationship, it's been a piece of contention at some point. It's how you have that discussion, not the outcome, not the result, and really being aware of the respect you're giving the person that you're with. Even the hardest business conversations where you are at serious odds, if you maintain respect for the other side, you're going to have a better long-term result. And that's really, while the objective is clean dishes, the broader objective is I want to have a good relationship long-term with that person.
Right. Especially because it's going to spill over into other things. So I saw something interesting when I was in my negotiations at work, especially with the union, that we would approach the table differently depending on our moods, depending on how much energy we had for this conversation in general. And that had a lot to do with what was going on at home, what was doing before we even walked in those work doors. So, what are some signs that you can start to already observe before you have these conversations at home or at work of someone approaching this negotiation from depletion versus like alignment? I want this too. Let's get this done. Let's meet in the middle. We've all had those conversations where either us or the other person have approached it from a depleted state, already
Mhm.
distrustful, very pessimistic about the outcome. How can you start to recognize those signs early?
Yeah, so we've already established that in a negotiation, we're starting with the outcome in mind. It's a combination of the result in the relationship that we're looking for out the other side. A negotiation is a series of steps to put you in a better position at the end of it. So when you look at all of the steps leading into the bargaining discussion, the next step is readiness or preparation. And what I like to tell audiences, there's no negotiation without preparation. There's no knee-jerk negotiations. And that's really threefold. Number one, are you ready to negotiate? If you're a person who doesn't like negotiating and this is going to be hard and you're going into it like that, the goal for you is to build confidence. And you build confidence in big negotiations like union negotiations by preparing. What's my opener? What's my walkway? What's my leverage? What am I willing to concede? What am I looking for? What are my absolute um, walkaways or points that I will not budge on? When you start to put these things into order, you become more confident and you feel going into the negotiation that, all right, I know what a good outcome looks like for me. Here's where I'm going to stand, and this is where I'm going to put my foot in the ground. If you're on the other side of this, and I see this in executives where I'm ready all the time, I'm just going to pick up the phone and do it. That's a different type of readiness. You might mentally be ready, but if you're going too quickly and you don't put the time into building a business case or a series of arguments, you're also not going to get a good outcome. It's the middle of these two things. It's the being ready by preparing yourself to get there. The other half of this equation, of course, is the person sitting across from you. If they're not ready to negotiate, you're not going to get an outcome and you're wasting time. What I tell people to do is the best negotiation is set an intentional time to have the discussion. You mentioned HR. When you think about HR, you don't just call candidates on the phone and start interviewing them. Whoa, what company is this? Who is? I'm not ready to go. That would be almost absurd. Similar to setting up an interview, you want to set up a massive negotiation. You get the right people at the table, you have your argument ready, and you have that difficult discussion. And ultimately, what you want to do is grow closer towards an outcome, no matter what type of negotiation you're looking at.
Yeah, I definitely think the preparation is something we skip. Whether it's impulse or just ex like you said, excitement or overconfidence even, because I would have people even just slowly close my HR door, right? And they're like, "We need to talk. I need a raise," and I'm like, whoa, like I'm in the middle of a Zoom meeting right now. Like this is not a good time." But if we would have set intentional time to have a good conversation about what are they actually looking for, um, where have they grown? What's the business case for it? That conversation would have actually went very well for them. But the unpreparedness, the interruption, it sends a whole tone difference to the negotiation conversation. So I always tell people when they're looking for flexible work schedules or raises or a different type of job within their company, exactly what you said is, are you prepared? Do you even know what you want? And then set in an intentional stage to make sure that it's going to be a successful outcome. And the conversation goes very different.
Timing is critical on those types of conversations. Like a great time to have that type of discussion is right after you get a good review. Hey, you're doing great. I really like what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. That's a good time for you to say, I've been doing a little research and I think my salary should be in this range. Or, I'm really struggling at home. I think I can keep up these results. I'd like to work Monday and Friday from home. Timing is critical. If you are negotiating for yourself against a company's HR department, it's the timing, that piece that really is important. And also preparing there, making sure you've got the data to back up what you want and why there's justification.
Yeah.
What you're essentially doing in that discussion is you're making the decision maker's job easier. If you're leaving it up to chance, hey, I'd like a raise. Why? Well, I did good. Okay. Well, now they've got to go back and do the work. But if you say, you know what, I'd like a 4% raise to become equal to this market data that I found. And the reason is, you challenged me on A, B, and C projects and we knocked them out of the park. I'm currently working on D, E, and F, and I think they're going to go well. I'd like to keep that momentum. That's a much stronger argument.
Right. You just switch the mentality from a push to like a solution orientated open conversation. And that's what people want to be around. We talk a lot on the show about bringing the energy, like the difference between walking in a room and just feeling it like, ugh, like nothing good is going to come out of this room. And then you walk in the same room, different people, same circumstances, and it's like forward moving mentality.
Mhm.
But the conversation has switched to everyone's prepared. We're all intentional about the conversations that we're having, and the goal is to move forward. So, oh, you're hitting it on the nail here. So, what helped you during this process of, 30 years, during, two cancer diagnosis, open heart surgery. Obviously, you still had to show up in life. We can't just, you know, disappear for 30 years. So you had to show up. What helped you regain a sense of control? Because I think sometimes when we get into these what I call survivorship modes, where it feels like nothing is going as it should have. Um, you have to gain a sense of control again. How do you do that?
Yeah, I guess to answer that, Kelly, when I think back, I was diagnosed in the 90s. That's a long time ago. The treatments were different. The name of my diseases changed. The building where I got chemotherapy was recently torn down. It's an honor to have outlived a lot of the things that happened then. And in the 90s, when I had cancer, there was no not-for-profits, there was no national dialogue, there was really nothing. And the term cancer survivor was not even a thing yet. And what worked for me was just by coincidence, Lance Armstrong, who I named my son after, took to the Tour de France and was selling, saying F cancer, and he was on Capitol Hill arguing, and Lance Armstrong started the national dialogue on cancer. And it was following in his footsteps that really helped me become a survivor. Instead of worrying so much and being scared, I thought, you know what? What if I just go out there and go for it? Like put everything I have into sports, events, my career, and just launch myself back into life and to hell with cancer, the rest of this. And I've heard this from other survivors who've done the same thing. They call that taking it to the disease. Like you have to take it back to the disease in order to survive and show it who's boss, as opposed to waiting for, I'm not like when I would go in for follow-up scans, it's something now that people call scanxiety. It's a scan where you go in and they determine if it's come back or not. I started by going in there terrified. And then I decided, it's just a slight mental shift. I decided to go in there to show them it's not back. I'm not here for you to tell me whether it is or isn't. I'm here to show you that it's not. That really made a big difference. And that launched me into doing mountain climbs and endurance swims and marathons and all this wild stuff. And a lot of that was coping to deal with how hard it is to go through cancer, but it also is to create experiences and memories at a time when I physically could, that I could remember in the future and be proud of. So that's my advice: is just go after it. Don't sit there waiting for it to come back or for it, waiting there in indecision. Go out and live it and show that it's gone.
Yeah. And I love that mindset shift because I think a lot of us, especially with the external pressures that we have visually on social media and just what is talked about most, which is negative things, that we become that. We get diagnosed with something, we become that. We're grieving someone, we become that. And you really showed the switch. Like you can be surrounded by that. Or you can say, okay, I'm gonna go in for this scan just to prove you're not here. Or I can go do this experience because I can because I'm gonna show you that I can because I'm not that. And I think that a lot of us get stuck in the I can't. And it's such like a simple little
Yeah.
thing to say, but like you said, prove them wrong. Prove, I mean, that's my stubbornness coming out, but if you are unhappy of something that's going on in your life or where you're at or your job, um, prove them wrong, right? And you're 100% in control of that. And obviously it takes work. Rick didn't just like jump into the water or jump into a marathon or anything like that. But I think that shift um, of mentality can change the whole negotiation on life, right?
I'll give
And the
you
outcome you want.
let me give you a good story about that. So if you're hearing something like that, if you're hearing survivors talk about like all these milestones and everything that they achieved. You don't achieve that the day after you stop chemotherapy or treatment. It takes a long time to get there. And it's the process that is the most fun because, like, for me, training and being outside and breathing in the fresh air and being able to do that every day was such an honor, such a privilege. The way I started running, I used to live in Sacramento. In Sacramento, you have it's different than living in Wisconsin because you can be active all year round and the diet is a little bit better and so forth. And so we would come back, my family and I, back to Wisconsin, and we were here for 2 weeks. And let me tell you, it was a feeding frenzy. I was eating every Christmas cookie, every Cheeto, Frito, snack, Dorito, all that stuff. And I got back to California, and my wife said, "I need you to stop at the grocery store to pick up some food." Okay, no problem. So I go to the grocery store, and I'm getting out of the car, and I blew out my pants. Like the whole back of my pants is wide open. I have no idea what fortunately, yeah, I was wearing underwear, so we're good there. So I'm like, do I want to drive all the way home and change pants and pick up one thing at the store, or should I just go in there? I just went in there, and I'm like, oh my God, are you an idiot? Like, what? I feel so stupid walking around in my pants and a big tailgate hanging out. So finally, I got home and I thought, this stinks. Like, I don't want to feel like this. I'm embarrassed. So I just went out and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to grab at the time it was my iPod. I grabbed my iPod and I went out and I'm like, I'm just going to run half a mile. And so I went out there and I listened to two songs and I liked it. And I'm like, this was fun. I should do this again. So then I did it a couple more times, and that half mile turned into a mile, and eventually that grew into a 4 mile circuit that I would do routinely every night. And I started running. And then we had this block that was 7 miles around this large block where we live. And one morning I woke up and I said to her, I'm like, I'm going to run around the block. And she's like, can't do that. Why not? I'm going to try it. So I ran around the block. I'm like, I don't feel bad. Then it grew into 10 miles. Then I met a guy at work who was in marathons, and you see where this is going. Eventually, I went from blowing out my pants in a parking lot to running the Boston Marathon. And it wasn't because I was like, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. And no, it was like a fun journey of, hey, I hit rock bottom here. This is embarrassing. I don't want to look like this or feel like this. So I'm just going to chip away at it and enjoy being outdoors and enjoy all the fun it comes with training. And then the fruit of that was running that event and having that memory and that story. But it's all those hours and days that I spent really well investing time that is the real benefit from that. What I really love thinking about that. It
Yeah.
took about 2.5 years to go from pants to marathon. But
Yeah, it's those micro moments though. I always say take a small step. And again, it sounds kind of cheesy, but people see me 5 years after my burnout collapse. Like I wasn't in good shape 5 years ago.
yeah,
My exercise was walking to the mailbox because my heart hurt and I couldn't breathe. But then eventually I went for longer walks and then I started going hiking and then started going backpacking again. So it's those little micro moments, but you had to start somewhere. Start
yeah,
something that makes you feel good, makes you feel a little more alive, even if you're going
yeah,
out and just the smell in the fresh air. Okay, do that for a minute. Okay, then a couple days from now, do that 5 more minutes. If you find joy in it, chase the joy
yeah.
and continue there. Based on kind of your recovery journey and now all these negotiation conversations that you're having with businesses and CEOs, um, how has your recovery journey kind of changed about how you think about these negotiation strategies and not just with people, right? And these conversations that you're having and how you're setting up that outcome, but also just your strategy on life. Because it's easy for those things that you just mentioned to go on the back burner when things get busy. So how have you kind of changed your strategy or approach?
I think earlier in life, and I believe this is true for a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, let's say, your goal is to accumulate experience for you. Like you want to have a certain job, you want to do a certain thing. And it's more self-focused, and it should be because there are certain skills that you have. You have a certain energy level. You're physically very strong at that to start accumulating the foundation or your life's body of work. Whatever you put into your 20s and 30s, even if it's struggling with surviving something, that will be the foundation of something that you bring forward later. So now I'm in my 50s, if you believe this. Now being this old, I'm saying that tongue in cheek, listener. Don't come at me. Don't come at me. So when you hit this point, it's less about like how many more blanks can I do, marathons, mountains, whatever. And now it's about how can I help people realize the same thing for themselves? What have I learned along the way that makes sense to get somebody through an experience or to the finish line in a discussion? So when I look at my different clients in negotiation, every one of them is different. They're all unique. They all have unique challenges. If you had 100 different qualities of a good negotiator, some of them have 20, some of them have 80, but they're missing some gaps. And it's my job to walk with them to the finish line. My business is called No One Walks Alone. And I walk alongside them until they get to the point where they're comfortable with the outcome. And we figure out how to do that. And I think that's the difference between then and now is you accumulate experience while you're young and you share the experience and teach as you grow older. And so that's the point I'm at in my career, and that's what I bring to the table with different clients.
Hmm. And I love that you said that there's different seasons of life because I think I skipped that part. I was always trying to climb the ladder, pay off my mortgage by 40, and have like, the big dream life. And I missed the point. Like there's blackout periods from when my kids were little because I was so stressed out. My body went into survivorship mode and literally
Yeah.
blackout. And so I see pictures and I'm in them and I don't even remember being there holding my daughter, and it's interesting because I think that hustle season for me ended and I didn't acknowledge that. Um, I needed to be elsewhere. I needed to be present at home. I needed to, do one thing, not seven. And I just kept going. And I love that you're honoring seasons of life because I think that also the opposite can be true, right? You can be antsy and have ambition, and everyone's telling you to slow down, and that doesn't feel right.
Hmm.
So, um,
Yeah.
really following what does it feel like you want to do at the core versus maybe what everyone around you might be saying.
Yeah, it's the joy piece that's part of it that you brought up earlier too. You got to do things that you love doing. Burning out is that's a tough situation to be in. Um, and I'm certainly not the expert in that area, but I think when you start to put some of these survivorship techniques together, it's a good cross-pollination between that and other things. You know, if there's anything to learn from this type of conversation, it's you can go through some bad stuff and bounce back. You know, you're not stuck in the hole. You just got to fight your way out of it. And then when you're out, enjoy what you want to do, learn from it, help others. There's a lot of different options afterwards.
Yeah. And someone told me once after a burnout program, they said, "Wow, you're so lucky." And I was like, "What? That's a weird thing to say after this program." And you just found out like I almost had a heart attack and 35 from stress. And she says, "What a lesson learned." And what an honor that you get to live your life so fully now. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's right, right? I needed a slap in the face. My goal or my mission is to get people ahead of that crash and burn state, to start acknowledging where their energy lies early. But yeah, she was right. And similar to what you're saying, a diagnosis where you're like, okay, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with myself now? Um, I just found out that time is not guaranteed. And that's how I felt too when I started moving and doing things. Is like if you've ever been bedridden and you literally cannot do things, it changes how you approach when you can do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll never forget having cancer, dropping out of college, and I was an honors student at where I went to school. Um, And just thinking I'm not going to get a degree, that made me so angry. Angrier than anything else in my life was that I was going to be denied graduating where there was other people who were out partying and, skipping class and just goofing around. They're going to get degrees, but me, I'm hosed. And that made me, I just remember my mentality at age 19 and 20 when I was going through this, like just furious. And when I finally was done with chemotherapy and went back to college. I finished chemo on July 31st, 1996. And 2 weeks later, I went back to college and moved back into the dorms. I had no like, there's no rebound time. But I was like, I am taking 18, 19 credits. I don't care. Pile it on. I want to graduate as soon as I can and make up for missing time because if this comes back again, I'm not going to make it. And um, I don't know. I just kept going with that, but it's just an interesting philosophy as a survivor, how those things kind of shift for you as you go through them.
So looking back, what's one negotiation, either in work or life, that you would approach completely differently now? So you did it one way in the past, and now looking back, now that you have all these years and experiences and different negotiation conversations, what would you approach differently now?
Well, in my past, I dealt a lot with Southeast Asia, Singapore, Taiwan, China, and I worked for a large technology company that managed factories there. And I hammered those people as hard as I could, solely looking for a result. And I got a lot of results, but ultimately the relationship piece of that was missing. I needed to do a better job of building relationships with that type of counterpart, which is why the philosophy of how I teach negotiation today really keeps both the result and the relationship front in the windshield. Um, because it just, even though I drove the results, the relationship lagged and it wasn't as good as it could have been for my company. And I'll give you a good story about this. When I worked there, or when I had that job, I would travel to China, and there was this one supplier, and they did a lot of business with us. They would always put us up in this lavish, posh boardroom, and we'd be in there and be nice leather recliners, and this is the heart of Dongguan, like very rural, very very, for lack of a better term, blue collar factory type place. Not this is not a tourist place. This is a workplace, a work center. So to have like this boardroom with a fridge and air conditioning and food, and we were like the emperor came to town. So one day I came there, and this is after a few of these meetings, and we were walking up the stairs towards the boardroom, and instead of turning left, we turned to the right, and we walked into a very plain conference room. There's a table, some plastic chairs, and white walls, maybe like a whiteboard, and nothing. And I was like, this is weird. Why are we in this room? So I asked my host, I said, what's up? Why are we not in the other room? And they're like, oh, it's busy today. Okay, so we start doing our business. We're talking with them, all this stuff. And then I always had them take me on a factory inspection. They had a six-floor factory. I'd walk the factory, just eyeballing it, not really, not really doing anything technical, but just making sure that my company had a presence there. So we do the first two floors, and then we get to the third floor, and we go down a level. And I said, well, what about this floor? And they go, you're not allowed in there. So what do you mean? That's a different company's floor. We can't let you go in there. And I was thinking, wait, I thought I was a partner. I thought I had full access. What ended up happening was I hammered these guys so much on relationships. Eventually, they were in a survival mode, and they found one of our competitors to come in there, and we're taking great care of them. So much so that that competitor had the boardroom and a full floor, which was a serious situation. And we lost a lot of leverage with them because of that. And it was because we pressed too hard. There was just too much bleeding. I wish I would have worked that differently. If I were to do it differently now as a wiser older person, I would have worked that in a different direction because
Yeah. Well, and it looks like a common battle of short term, right? Short-term pain of building relationships, and maybe you don't get every deal, and long-term gain, like we're building the relationships they can count on you, versus like
Yeah.
short-term gain right now, and long-term pain, which is you're kicked out of the plant. Well, Rick,
That's
I appreciate.
that
Uh-huh.
is so good. I might reuse that in the seminar, Kelly. Thank you for
Yes. I think
yeah.
it came out in the exercise culture, but I use it all the time with the conflict because you can milk conflict just the same, right?
Yeah.
Ignore it, but it's gonna blow up even bigger later. Or you can address it right now, short-term pain, and long-term you have a relationship that is repaired and strengthened. So yeah, well, thank you so much, Rick, for being on the show. You are a testament in real life flesh of resiliency and how you've combined your work in life to lead this mission of helping others to negotiation styles, but also where they want to go with life and the refocus on experiences and relationships. I appreciate your time and sharing your stories. Rick's information is in the show notes. Go check out some of his speaking topics, his book, and thank you so much, Rick, for being on the show today.